Hi everyone. So I'm Stacey Baines, the Learning Accreditation Lead for Operational Delivery Profession. I had the lovely opportunity to catch up with Rupert McNeil earlier today, and we had a fantastic talk about all things qualifications and his career journey and how professional development has helped him kind of get to where he is today. Really recommend you have a listen, so why not carry on listening and see what we got up to.
Hi, I'm Rupert McNeil. I'm the Government Chief People Officer. That means that I'm responsible for the HR function and the HR profession across the civil service, which is great, a great privilege and great fun. Best job I've ever had, and it's great in so many ways. I mean, that's basically a bit like being the HR director for a whole sector. But of course, in most sectors, you find that the organisations in that sector compete with each other. But the great thing about central government and the public sector is that we're not competing at all. We're trying to collaborate to get great public service outcomes. And my job, really, the essence of it, is to make sure that the civil service has the right people with the right capabilities to deliver things in the short, medium and long term. So we're not just thinking about what we need to get through things like COVID or the EU transition, two big things that we've all been dealing with, I think, in some degree, but also what are we going to need in 2030, 2040, 2050? And of course, people who are apprentices coming in now are going to be in charge in the 2050s, maybe before then. So we need to make sure that they're ready and that we are anticipating some of the skills that we're all going to need at that time.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really interesting. I think it's fair to say we've all had a very challenging and different kind of past year. So yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. So I mentioned obviously with Learning at Work Week, and our focus for this particular session is about your experiences with qualifications. So could you just give me a little bit of background in terms of your accreditation journey and kind of your relationship with qualifications, really, to where you've got to today?
Yeah. So. My relationship with qualifications, it goes a long way back. So I was 54 on the 24th of April, and I guess I did my first exams, like most of us, in before I was 10. So yeah, they're all counts qualifications. I sort of count my qualification journey really with, in terms of professional qualifications. I joined Arthur Andersen, as it then was, one of the accountancy firms, in its tax practice, and I did my ATT, which some HMRC people may know about, and others. So I got my tax technician qualification. First exam I'd done for a number of years. I did it when I was about 28, and it was it wasn't easy. It was going into classes and at BPP and doing, but I enjoyed it, because it was interesting, it was helpful for the job I was doing at the time, and it actually gave me some confidence about sitting exams again, which I hadn't done for a few years. So then I didn't actually sit exams again until I did I decided that I wanted to become chartered in the CIPD. And the way that that works, and it's interesting about the different ways you can do qualifications, of course, this will be a bit of a theme, I'll say, is there are lots of different ways to get a qualification. You can sit an exam, or you can build up a portfolio and be assessed on the basis of your prior achievement. Many qualifications allow that. It's a really good way to do it. And I had to assemble my evidence against the criteria that the CIPD then had, and show that I could do all those things. Now, after that, my next qualification was actually also CIPD. So I applied to be a CIPD fellow. Now, fellowship is the sort of standard that we expect for everybody who's in the SCS in HR. It's a really good qualification. And again, it's a slightly different example. So there, you do a case study. So there's quite an exam, but you do a case study, and then you get assessed on your experience as well. Again, assembling a portfolio, and I found that a hugely useful experience, and we're really keen in promoting that among the HR community as well. Now, by this point, I was going to be a bit of an exam, or a bit of an accreditation addict. So I thought about, well, what's the next thing I want to do? So the thing I'd really wanted to do for a long time was qualify as an accountant. Actually, because I really, I find it interesting. And it's also management accounting is really relevant to everything I do in my work, because a lot of it's about strategy and about broader commercial and business activity. So I thought, well, could I get qualified with CIMA, Chartered Institute of Management Accountants? And again, nice example of how things have changed since I did those tax exams. So the way CIMA works is that you basically have to demonstrate, have you met the criteria? Can you get exemptions? And actually, helpfully, I got quite a few exemptions because of all the work I'd done through while I was working out through Anderson and through my tax practice and other things. So I was able to go in on a special program, which meant that I just had to do one exam. And that was a case study exam. And again, completely different format. And it really showed me how much things have changed since I'd done the last exam. The punchline here is that the first time I did it, I failed by 1 mark. And I had to go to a basement somewhere in East London and do the exam online. And I was so rusty. I've never done an online exam. And it's a really good system, the way CIMA works. So they give you a case study that you read before. Then you get given a question, and then through the course of it's very strict. Like after an hour, it stops you answering that part of the question. It drops another piece of information in, and you have to answer that, and so on. So they basically got 3 parts to the question. But the marking scheme is very transparent, and I put it down to technique. I just had not practiced enough. So I took it a few months later, and I passed respectably. I'm pleased to say. So I got my CIMA qualification. Now, CIMA doesn't just require you to finish the exam. You also have to produce a portfolio to basically show that you have, against all their criteria, met their standards. Both to get, I was doing 2 things, to get the qualification as a member, to get the CIMA qualification, the accountancy qualification, and also to get the qualification as a fellow, to which you've also got to show some level of your leadership experience. And then in parallel with that, being a bit of a glutton for punishment, I also at the same time thought, linked to something that the operational delivery profession has really been pioneering, I should look at the Chartered Management Institute and see if I could get a qualification there. Now they had very kindly made me a companion. And I thought, well, I feel a bit of a fraud if I haven't actually done the qualification, so I better do the qualification. So I got that underway, and that was great because the Chartered Management Institute has got a really good standard, it's got a really good ethical framework, as does CIMA, very complementary. And I did my assessment with them, and I just recommend that to anybody really. And I thought that was interesting because it's a bit how we're thinking about skills in the civil service at every level. You've got your technical professional anchor, and then you've got what you do in terms of leading and managing, and those are parallel, complementary, but you can look at them in a distinct way. So, and I'm really proud of having got those qualifications, and I've been encouraging people to do the same thing as well. And finally, I think this will be the last thing I do. I'm just about to submit a proposal to do a doctorate in business administration, a DBA, which is about how boards operate. That's going to take me about 3 years if they accept me. I hope they do. One of the things about all the things I've done is that they are, I like to learn. I find that I need the discipline and structure of courses to learn and qualifications. And I also need them to be practical and relevant. So I think there's a great thing. There's some really interesting concepts in Greek, actually, in ancient Greek. And one of them is this concept of metis, which is practical wisdom. And I think a lot of what we need to do in work is to acquire practical wisdom, and you do that through looking at the qualifications and understanding enough about the theory, and then applying it in practice, and then linking those things together.
Brilliant, that's amazing. And I think actually seeing that journey as you've just described there, and the changes to the qualification system as you've gone through, and the different ways that you can be accredited as well. So for people who maybe are a little bit more exam kind of fearful, there is options that don't have exams as well that can be more practical. So yeah, really, really, really good examples there. So Rupert, it's really interesting because I think as we'd kind of done the qualification journey there, we could almost map your career as you were going along there. So how did you actually find studying while working at the same time? Because that's a lot of questions that we get asked. How do I juggle that? How have I got, I'm working full time or part time and balancing home life. How did you find that balance?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it needs to be, the way I tend to think about it is a bit like exercise. I think you need to be quite disciplined and find some quiet time and actually be quite particularly in a family context, to be a bit selfish, carve the time out for yourself to do that and work out how much time you'll actually need. Treat it like a work task that you're doing at home. And it's one of those things where, one of the things I wasn't good at in the early part of my career or my childhood was I wasn't good at doing practice questions. But I would say that is quite an important thing. And also, if you're doing an exam, I actually much prefer assembling portfolios than doing exams, because I think that's actually quite that's quite a tangible thing, and you can see the thing assembling in front of you as you pull it together. So what I tend to do is I tend to create documents on my computer. Again, so thinking about being a bit planful and a bit tactical about it. So let's take the CMI. If you go to the CMI, the standards are all there. You look at the standards, you sort of break them down. Maybe you might create an Excel spreadsheet if that's what you like to do. I love Excel. Or a Word document, and you put it in there, and you say, okay, so let me think about this. How much of this do I know? And break it down. That gives you familiarity in the standards and puts you in the mind of the assessor. And that's a really important thing. How are they actually going to mark you? So I've got here, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the CIMA competency framework. You probably can't see it clearly, but if you go onto the CIMA website, CIMA competency framework is there. Most professional bodies have their frameworks there in the sort of public domain, and you go through it, and they will say what's the learning outcome. It's like school, and what are the criteria, and then you just need to work through those and build yourself. It's like any like what I advise my kids. Have an exam timetable and break it up, and don't get anxious about how long it's going to take. Take as long as you need.
Absolutely, I think that's such a good tip, and especially having the flexibility when you are studying in work, you tend to get extended deadlines and a longer duration to really kind of map your journey, as you've said. So no, I think that's perfect advice.
Can I add one thing, which is it's good to have a buddy or buddies on this. I think people who are doing it as well as you, who you can not to let that stress you. so if I think about this, I did mine with a great colleague who's actually a finance professional. He was doing his CIMA at me. He passed the first time, but we did. We were in the same study group with other people, and I'm still in touch. I was having a call the other day with one of my study partners, and it's good. It's a nice way to make new friends actually.
Absolutely, and it's that support network, isn't it? I think that's so important, like you say, keeping each other going and almost that friendly competition. So when you see your colleague and peer kind of getting through theirs, it kind of spurs you on a little bit as well, doesn't it? Which is always good. No, that's brilliant. So we have a lot of people in operational delivery, obviously doing some fantastic work, really kind of experienced and specialists in their remits. But a lot of them feel that qualifications aren't for them, either because, again, they've been out of education for a while, or there's that nervousness. So my question is, what advice would you give to someone who thinks a qualification isn't for them? They've sort of ruled it out, it's not for me. What would you kind of say to those people?
I would say that you should think of it as you deserve and you've earned recognition of your expertise. Anyone watching this conversation, Stacey, is going to be doing a pretty good job, and what the qualification does. So I think people confuse qualification sometimes with exams or that. Actually, I would take it as an opportunity to show people how much you know and how good you are at your job. One of the things that comes out from me, I've only been a civil servant for about 5.5 years. And like many people who come in from other sectors, I'm just amazed by the quality, expertise, dedication of the colleagues I work with, many of whom have been here for many decades in some cases. So I think it's just a question of getting that recognised, and you shouldn't be embarrassed or anxious about that. It's what people deserve to get that acknowledged, and part of our job in the HR function and in professions like the ones that you and I are involved in professional teams is to make it easier for people to do that. Because what actually matters is, can you do the job? Can you deliver the outcomes that the job requires? And actually, that's why I think the portfolio of evidence approach is probably the most helpful way of doing it, because that is actually evidence that you've done the job and delivered the outcomes rather than just pass a test in it, which is always only a way of simulating whether you could do the job. That's what exams are.
Absolutely. And I think people have that association that they're thinking about school, and if you had a bad experience at school, I think you associate that later in life with qualifications. That can sometimes be people's kind of blocker, I think.
Well, it's really good point, Stacey, and I think that if you think about, I think about watching. I've got a 26-year-old and a 19-year-old in my family. I've also got my wife who went to university in her 50s. So, but I think what we all recognised was that, I recognised was that things changed massively from when I was at school. And universities change massively, and the way in which we do workplace assessment has changed massively. So I think I think people might be really pleasantly surprised by how I wouldn't say easy it is, but how enjoyable it is. Maybe that's the way to put it, to go and study in this way.
Absolutely. No, really, really good point. And again, a little cheeky question, Rupert. Again, we've followed your journey on there, and you've done lots and lots of qualifications, clearly very passionate about accreditation and the benefits it can bring. Do you feel that having those qualifications has helped you on your career journey in terms of that progression and where you've kind of got to today?
Yeah, so I think that I don't want to leave the impression that you're doing these things because they want to do these things just to get the to get the badge. I think it's got to be relevant to your job, and there's no doubt that whether it was the CIPD work or CIMA or CMI, they've all helped me think much more clearly about what my job actually involves. So if I take it's an interesting example actually, because the other thing that is important, of course, is continuous professional development. That actually doesn't just stop there. You've got to keep yourself up to date and refreshed. So I did CIMA based on the 2015 curriculum. The 2019 curriculum, which is very good. The 2019 curriculum did a big refresh and added a whole digital element. Now, I didn't need to know that for my exam. In fact, I would probably have been marked down in that exam because it was based on the 2015 curriculum if I'd put too much about the digital stuff in there. But what we're actually doing now is made me realise that to be an HR professional, or an operational delivery professional, and there are lots of similarities between what we do, any professional, frankly, in government, you've got to have enough. You've got to be an intelligent client when it comes to technology. You can't escape technology. So I'm actually looking at how we can take the sort of thing we've got with that CIMA module and make it an additional accreditation that we expect people in HR roles to do. And we're doing that with the technology function. And Joanna Davinson, who's the new head of function there, and I sort of saying, well, look, we'll pilot it in HR and then see if we can do it in other areas. Another place which is pretty very relevant to operational delivery colleagues is using data. And that's, again, technology is one aspect, but we all need to use data and use analytics. And in my career, I worked for Barclays, so in banking, and then I went to work to be the UK HR director for Aviva, the insurance company. And I think probably in the 2 years I was at Aviva, I learnt more than in any other job, technically, because I went there and I learnt, interestingly, about two things. I learnt about customer service and process design and systems thinking, and how, a really for me, there is no, I'm not just saying this because we're doing this for the operational delivery profession, there's no harder environment than a service centre, actually, just in terms of the whole system operating. And agents in service centres on the phones, people supporting customers directly, that's a very skilled job. It involves quite a lot of emotional effort, I think, as well as technical knowledge. And you think about the level of technical knowledge which you get when you pick up the phone to someone in HMRC, or you're talking to a work coach in DWP. Just take those examples. There's a lot of skill, huge amount of skill there, and also those roles, sort of, if you're running a service centre like that, you've got a lot of data that you need to analyse to make sure the system is operating, and the people who know best. This is what I love about operational delivery professionals. The people who know best how to improve the system are the people actually doing the work at the front line. So that the art of being a great leader, I think, in those areas, great manager, is to be able to draw on that energy and information and know how to change the system. So it's really interesting.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think that'll resonate with a lot of people out there in operations at the moment, particularly thinking again of the feelings and some of the emotions over the past sort of 14, 15 months now as well. I think it's that those roles in particular have been more critical, I think, than ever. So no, that's fantastic.
Well, I think in terms of well-being, there are a few guides. I'll share a bit about my experience, actually. So I think the first thing is that's really important, and it's a skill, it's a learned skill, is self-monitoring and being able to, that's good in any circumstances, but to be able to sort of know and name how one is feeling oneself at any point in time. And by that I mean everything from I'm hungry, or I'm getting hungry, so actually I should go and have that salad now rather than go for that Mars bar later in an emergency, to I'm feeling tired, I need to take a break, and I'm feeling under the weather, and other things like that. So, or actually, I'm feeling quite energized. Now is the time I should go and do that thing that I was, wanting to do. So self-monitoring, and that's really important because it's a bit of a trite phrase, but putting your own oxygen mask on first, like on the plane, is really important. You won't be a help to your colleagues or your family or other things if you're not looking after yourself. So that's a really important thing. And my personal view, it might be my age, but my personal view is sleep is really important. I think diet is really important. I think thinking carefully about caffeine is also really important, about how so because that interferes with sleep and other things. Also screen time, blue light is not good. So so thinking about all those things. Now I had a very salutary experience in 2014. So I, for lots of factors, work reasons, the nature of the work I was doing, I was working very hard. I'd sort of was burning the candle at both ends. They'd say I had an upper respiratory tract infection. I had some sad family news, all those things combined, and I just had a sort of an anxiety blowout. And but I was able to spot it and check myself out of work for probably about 3 or 4 months. Now I'm really glad I did that. I think I probably extended my life by doing that. And it's also a bit genetic too. I've discovered actually over time, I didn't know at the time, that in both sides of my family, men and women, but mostly men, have experienced over the past 100 years, in their 40s, they have a late 40s, there's a thing. So there's a genetic factor as well. So that was really that was a big wake-up call for me, and I sort of changed my lifestyle as a result of that. More exercise, better sleeping, being a bit more relaxed about my work. Not relaxed in doing it, but realizing that there were more important things than that. Being better at self-monitoring.
And thank you so much for sharing that and being so honest today. And I think, again, that will resonate with so many people. I think, I keep referring to recent times, but I think it will. And there's people that have probably really struggled, it'd be fair to say, this year. So that will mean a lot to people to hear that. So thank you for sharing that and being so honest. Fantastic.
So I think I'm part of corporate services, right? In any organisation, human resources, finance, technology. The way I tend to look at things is that, and something might have heard me say before, but organisations have purposes. For us, it's great citizen outcomes, defending the UK, all those things. Then they have a strategy to fulfil that purpose, and that's a bit different depending on the part of government you're in. HMRC is a different strategy to DWP and how it does that, for example, and DFE and DH. Everyone has their role to play, and then the strategy requires an operating model, and the operating model integrates people, technology, data, and money, typically, to make sure that those outcomes can be achieved. And HR is about the people and making sure that that bit is, the systems are in place to do that. But if you ask, what is the work of government, it comes down to two professions. The professions in which many people are in, and ODP is the biggest in all its different forms. So operational delivery and policy. And one of the things that we've seen, and I think if you talk to Peter Schofield, Angela, or to Tamara or Susan, their sort of counterparts in the policy profession, I think they would probably also sort of emphasise this, is that those two professions, ODP and policy, are increasingly integrated. You need to look at the two together. So when we think about fast streamers, for example, we think about them as integrated. Generalist fast streamers are doing, they need to be able to do both things, but that applies generally. And people you can't do policy without understanding about how you deliver it, and ODP people are have useful things to say about the policy because it's got to be deliverable. So that's really good. So very important. ODP has another role to play specifically in government, which is why the new website is so important, why the programs are so important. I'm really looking forward to seeing the website, by the way, in the summer. Is that they are ODP is sort of where most management happens. Most leadership and management, most leaders and managers are ODP leaders and managers. And I talked a bit about the challenge of customer service center environments and things like that. My view is that the environments in which operational delivery professionals are in are ones where, if those environments are not performing, very, very quickly. And therefore, the leadership and management that happens in them and the skills in them they have to be good, and they are very good. So that's everything from a prison to a job centre to an HMRC call centre to all the many operational delivery environments that operational delivery professionals are working in. And that's why in the new government skills and curriculum unit programme, we've got a number of strands. We've got 5 strands of activity. Strand 3 is the leadership and management strand, and that's the one where we're really grateful, choosing that word really deliberately, really grateful to Peter, Angela, and you, Stacey, and all your colleagues and the profession for hosting leadership and management. So we're saying very clearly to everybody, now leadership and management, the place that you need to learn that is, look at what the ODP do. That's where that needs to be based. And frankly, it doesn't matter whether you're right at the top of the organisation or an apprentice. You will be able to learn from how ODP think about leadership and management. So I'd really encourage people to look at that. By the way, also, I'd really encourage people to look at the apprenticeships, in-service apprenticeships. Look also at the roles that are in the ODP profession and outside. And you might, I'd sort of encourage people to do two things. One is to look at the roles in the ODP and say, okay, so that's actually a slightly different job from the one I'm doing now, but actually, when I look at what the standards say, I could do that job. So let me take an example. In both directions, if you're a prison officer, could you really be a great work coach? But you're doing the same type of thing. You're helping people get through their difficult life stages at one level. Similarly, if you're a work coach, could you be a prison officer? So I think thinking in those terms is really exciting, actually. And even if you decide that it's not for you, it helps you understand why you really are happy doing what you're doing, because people should be fulfilled in their current jobs. So that's one thing. And the other is to look at other professions. Really, there's a lot. If you're doing a great ODP job, maybe you'd like to try and be interested in being an HR business partner, or maybe you're working on data in ODP and think, well, actually, management accounting is quite interesting. So, and look, we have long careers, and yet at the end of it, one doesn't want to look back and say I didn't enjoy my job. So, and one of the great things I think about working in government is there are lots of jobs that we can do and enjoy. So I'd really encourage that, and I'm really appreciative of what the profession does. And the other thing I'd say about about any profession in government, and any profession is, two things. The first thing about professions is that they are there to protect amateurs from the counterintuitive. That's an important thing about professions. And a good thing to look up is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I learned about the past few years, but it's a really interesting thing that says that people who are really confident in something are often not competent in it. So, and there's a curve that you go down, become less confident, and then you get back up again as you actually start to know what you're doing. So, it's great that the important profession of operational delivery is recognised as a profession that has expertise, and people would ask questions before they start setting up an operational delivery situation, saying, I think I need some professional operational delivery people here to help me make sure I'm going to get this right. So I think I'd sort of think about that with the profession. But the other thing about profession is that it's owned by the profession. So everybody, it doesn't matter what you are in the operational delivery profession or in the HR profession, whether you're an apprentice or a director general or a permanent secretary, you all have a stake in the shape of the profession. And so you should be, I hope you don't mind me saying it, Stacey, people should be being quite demanding about what they want from the profession. If you think, look, we're actually coming across some really tricky technical issues. Let's take an example. Automation. We're all going to need to know about automation. If you think you need to know about automation, you should ask your profession team, where can I learn more about automation? But the trick here is as well, one of the best ways to learn about something professionally is to teach it yourself. And because because we're communities of volunteers and others who want to sort of make our professions really effective, just jump in and say, okay, I'm going to take an example. I don't know about automation right now, but give me 3 months and I'll teach a course on it, an introductory course on it. And I'll take people on the journey that I took over the last 3 months to learn about automation. That's a really effective way to build learning into organizations. And it's something I did way back in Arthur Andersen. I worked out that I needed to know about, for the job I was doing, I needed to know about share option pricing. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to set myself a target. I'm going to book a course. I am going to do the course, teach a morning on option pricing in 3 months' time. And that was an incentive. And I worked it through. And actually what surprised me was I was able to grasp much more of the maths than I thought I would. But then I had to convert that back. Richard Feynman, a great teacher, says this, you've got to be able to teach, not to know that you know it, you've got to be able to teach it. So that's a really long-winded way of saying, Stacey, I hope that people really volunteer and engage and help build the profession, being teachers, being coaches, mentors, etc. That's really exciting.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think we have some fantastic ambassadors and real kind of advocates of the profession. And so this session today is really going to help kind of spread that word and really hopefully raise awareness and get people excited to learn as well. I think, as you've touched on throughout today, that importance of continuous professional development that you and I are obviously very passionate about, and we just want to spread that as widely as possible. So no, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.